Good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we are finally on. I do apologize. We had a little bit of, let's call it technical difficulties. It only took us a couple of minutes to figure out. And so thank you, everyone, for coming in today. We're really, really appreciative of attending our KoreSummit Webinar Series for 2023. Today, these series are all going to be very specific to broker-dealers, registered funding platforms, and marketplaces that are operating with FINRA broker-dealers, secondary ATSs, and we're really hoping that you're going to get a lot of this to assist you. First of all, before we get started, I really want to thank our sponsors today that actually make this happen for all of us. We're really excited to have the ability to thank Nuvei, the third largest global payment acquirer in the world, NASDAQ publicly traded, providing payment services to the private capital markets. So we're really excited to have them here and supporting, and of course, KoreConX, the all-in-one infrastructure for the private capital markets. So on that note, today we are going to begin the series with Rule 17a-4. And I know it's going to seem like that's the only topic we're going to talk about, and we are, because we're going to have our cup of coffee like we always do, and our colleagues that are going to get them to introduce themselves, and then we're going to dive into what's been going on the last 7 months that's brought us to this particular moment that is pretty exciting. So let's start with you, Kiran. Take a moment just to say hello and introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Kiran Garimella, and I'm the Chief Scientist and CTO for KoreConX and co-founder of KoreChain. And I come from a financial background, many years in finance, and as a senior executive, global CIO for companies like General Electric, VP for Software AG, and so on. So I kind of grew up with a lot of the analytics, machine learning, AI, in which I have a PhD. And I do research in that area, but we also do a lot of the blockchain safety research and so on. And it's pretty exciting to be here and share with everyone some of the more exciting developments that have been happening.
Great, and I muted myself just when you were ending. All right, and of course, our special guest, one and only, Mr. Marty Tate.
Hi, thanks, Oscar. Maybe the one and only, I don't know. Marty Tate, I am a securities lawyer. I've been practicing for going on 25 years, focused primarily in public and private finance. I worked with funding portals, issuers, service providers, broker-dealers, you name it, in this space. And like I said, I've known Oscar for a long time, and we continue to move forward and evolve in this industry.
We have, haven't we? I know it's going to age all of us. So we've known each other over a decade. We'll leave it at that. Anything more than that, we'll say 2 decades. But it does signal the reason why we're having this discussion is that there's been changes that have come out of the Jobs Act, and it's having implications on broker-dealers because now they're transacting in different ways, and how technology is now an everyday aspect of what they're doing. And so I am excited. I can only, you look back and you hope that the mistakes don't get repeated, but we know we're all humans and we try to minimize all that. And hopefully those listening in today will take something out of it that will go back and create a plan for your firm or your organization and your colleagues to say, hey, we need to look at this and what it impacts. So, but let's talk a little bit, just for the sake of everybody. This year, 2023, has been a very disruptive year. And Marty, I don't know how many you've seen, but we have seen something that in no other years we've seen since the Jobs Act been implemented, and that is that a lot of subpoenas have been issued, a lot of investigations by FINRA, and a lot of fines, right? So
Yep.
if for all of you have not been paying attention to the news, and I don't want you all checking every day, but this has been one of the heaviest years that I've seen, where both SEC and FINRA have been reviewing the intermediaries in their activities. Would your assessment be the same for this year?
Yeah, you've definitely seen, over the last 18 months, I mean, you've seen just this increased in enforcement actions by the SEC. But alongside that, you have seen FINRA also stepping up their regulatory enforcement actions as well, or at least by levying fines. FINRA obviously is not a governmental agency, so they can't bring other actions, but they can impose fines, and that's something that we've seen happening with broker dealers, with funding portals. And so it's interesting. I think that a lot of it just has to do with changes in government administration. Some of it has to do with just increased staffing, and honestly, some of it sometimes just has to do with who's at the helm. I know that in working with FINRA, we've worked with FINRA for a dozen years or more, and it's become more and more difficult to get funding platforms approved, at least in my experience. But some of that, like I said, just might be the people, the luck of the draw or unluck of the draw, the person you get. So, but going back to your point, yeah, we have seen a definite uptick in fines and enforcement actions.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring you, Kiran, into it because it's going to lead into the discussion why we're here today, Rule 17a-4. And I know that you and I, from KoreConX point of view, we've been busy doing some of that data gathering because of it, and we've seen how more active both FINRA and SEC are, and I think that's the reason why, when we were in Salt Lake City with our other partners, North Capital and lawyers and everybody else, we soon realized that this was just in one party. It was the whole industry coming under review, and what we can't afford is having the industry coming down. So that kept you busy as well, right, Kiran?
That kept me extremely busy, right? I mean, our vision for this entire thing has been compliance, compliance, compliance. How do you make sure everyone is safe and secure? So we talked about this, Oscar, and way back, and we sort of anticipated that this would be happening. So this has not caught us by surprise at all. And what's funny about this whole thing is that the last time this entire area of the Rule 17a-4, that whole particular area, the last time a change was made in that, I believe, was like 16 years ago, way back in 97 or 96 or something like that. So which is really strange, right? You kind of think about it. But we have looked at this and said, hey, we got to protect our ecosystem from all of this. And how do we do that? And of course, we'll get deeper into all of the different things that we do to protect that. But you're right. I mean, this has kept us like really busy.
All right. So knowing that, so we want everybody here today, we just want to give you a little bit of backdrop as to why we were doing this, because Kiran's right. I mean, the rule's been around for a long time. It just went through a recent amendment in October of 2022. But what is the rule? So Marty, let's start with that. Just high level, what is Rule 17a-4? Why it's so important? Why are we all paying attention to it now? And we're obviously seeing the news and the fines, the multi-million-dollar fines. Let's get the audience to make sure they understand what the rule is first.
So Rule 17a-4 is just basically a record-keeping rule for broker-dealers and other financial service businesses. It requires, it was enacted to ensure preservation and accessibility of firm records, and it applies to all broker-dealers, including those engaged in security trading and self-regulatory activities, which one of the reasons why this is, why you and I started talking about this is we started talking about broker dealers and their role in securities offerings under the Jobs Act, and how does this apply, and does this apply, and what should they be doing? So that's what brought that's what started this conversation, like you said, back in a month ago here in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, it is interesting. So it is about record keeping, but the amendment that occurred in October is it's really specific about electronic record keeping requirements. Because here's the interesting thing that I've been dealing with. A lot of the broker dealers don't even know, and it's not just record keeping your book of records. Following the rule is also working with a third-party intermediary who is going to store it in a facility or a premise that meets the Rule 17a-4 requirements and is qualified to do so. So this is not just hey, we need you to keep records. There is some new requirements that need to be followed in order to ensure that if there's anything that is offside, this is where it maintains. So, Kiran, let's talk a little bit about the technology side, because people hear technology, we're referring to email, there's all that, but let's just deal with some of the specific components that the Rule 17a is dealing with. One of the items is that it's allowing, it wants broker dealers to put in I know it's going to sound a funny word, the warm format. So tell us a little bit about the warm format for us.
Certainly. One little backdrop I want to add to that one, because it is very pertinent to this type of discussion, is that I've been in financial services for many, many years, and all transactions, financial services are subject to making sure that people don't do things in an illegal way. Separation of concerns, right? There has to be separation of concerns. And that's the reason why we have, broker dealers and settlements and custody and, all of these different players touching this. And so being able to store all this data, these transactions, these records in a way that no one party can actually tamper with them is a primary consideration. The worm technology is a classic, and it stands for the write once and read many times. And there are the well-known cloud providers, Amazon AWS services, and so on, that have these provisions. And of course, AWS is in the front of many of these from the perspective of ensuring compliance with SEC, the FedRAMP, and the different programs that they have, right? So we deal with all of that. So the idea is, it's a technology where you send the data, and once it writes it on it, no one, including us, no system administrator, nobody anywhere can actually erase any of that. It's done. And usually there is a time period, but we can always increase the time period. We have 20 years or more if needed. But the point is, you take all this stuff, once it's all, it's all clear and nice and correct, you put it in storage and it's done. And independently, regulators can go in, regulators can actually go in there and verify that those records are there. And because of the nature of the technology that is guaranteed by Amazon AWS, everyone is assured that that is very safe. It's not being tampered with.
Yeah, let me chime in here a little bit and add to what Kiran was just saying. Is so the old rule, which is, and he, the acronym that the worm standard was which is, as he said, write once, read many times, basically just required that certain records, and we can talk about what those records need to be, but your original books and records need to be preserved in a non-rewritable, non-erasable format so that they couldn't be altered or deleted. And what that traditionally meant years ago was, was hard copies, right? It was paper copies. You'd store them in box. Companies like Iron Mountain would come and take them and they'd store them for you, or you'd store them on site. That technology then moved to, again, dating myself, but it's sort of this hardware-based technology like CD-ROMs, right? I think people would record everything, would put everything onto a CD-ROM, and you'd have to keep those. But as Kiran said, that with the advancement of technology and cloud services and AWS and all of these technologies that weren't anticipated by the old rule 17a-4, they introduced an amendment. The SEC provided an amendment that would allow the use of these cloud-based technologies, and it basically provided for a record keeper to use what's called in addition to the worm technology, to use a digital audit trail as sort of this alternative or addition to that storage, so that they basically, as long as you can audit who, what, when, where, why, with relation to the document, you could take advantage of some of these newer technologies.
I'm sure in the background there, it's very hardware based as well, just like a CD-ROM, right? I mean, that's actually implementation behind it.
Yeah,
I would think so. I mean, so the thing that's going through my mind. So I mean, you brought up an interesting point. It's already been there before. It's part of the broker-dealer manual. Everybody who is an intermediary in the space has been in the manual. So just before we go into the other question, Marty, why do you think it's somewhat of a shocker to a lot of the people in the a lot of the broker-dealers on what it is? Because we've experienced it. Here we are. We're a provider. We provide we host and back up all the data in a facility that meets Rule 17a-4. So we make sure of that, and we provide them the necessary letter. And they go, "What is this letter for?" Well, this is a letter you need to file with FINRA. And they go, what are you talking about? Nobody ever told me I need to do that. Why do you think that? You're laughing because So where's the disconnect from this and what's going on right now?
Well, I just don't think that, honestly, and I don't know if this is a small shot problem or a big shot problem, but I think it's probably just a problem across the board. But I just don't think that record keeping is something that people really think much about, right? We have our laptops, we have our computers, we keep records there, right? We shouldn't, but I think that sort of data retention has become something that we don't think about much anymore, because things have gotten super easy. Again, you used to have to print everything. I mean, every paper was signed, you had hard copies of things, you had wet signatures. They were stored, they were put in file cabinets, they were put in book. Now everything's done electronically. If somebody needs to find something, they say, well, here, let me search my Gmail or whatever and try to find that. But again, those systems, of using your Gmail or whatever, are not going to be sufficient to comply with 17a-4. And so I think that people are thinking about it now because people are getting fined, and there are enforcement actions, and suddenly we're getting contacted by broker dealers saying, hey, help us put this in place. They're talking to people like Oscar saying, we had no idea that we had to do this. So you brought up another point. This was a change that took place in the rules, which is this idea of an undertaking, which is, you said they have to sign something. And traditionally, the SEC actually revised that undertaking requirement a little bit, so that to make it easier, it basically provided an alternative to the third party undertaking. Now they could have it basically, the new rule, because Amazon, and we had this issue with like a funding portal, Amazon's not going to sign something that says, hey, you can come in and look through all our records. So the new undertaking rule just basically says that these cloud service providers, that says you own this information and you have access to it. That's the new rule versus, we undertake to do all of these other things that third parties used to have to attest to.
And Kiran, the other thing that I'm maybe is when we talk about record keeping, let's talk about what a record is a little bit, because this is, I think it's
Yeah.
another misunderstanding, Marty, as well. And obviously we've seen it because of the big players getting the fines. They go, oh, we didn't know WhatsApp was part of that. We didn't know Telegram was part of that.
Exactly.
So because when people hear record, they're thinking of the old traditional piece of paper, put it in a file. But when they're talking digital, they're referring to all the reference. So let's go through that a little bit, Graham, all the different types of, because I think the audience needs to understand that all the things, funding platform, but please.
I mean, the most common forms obviously are going to be your system's records, right? People come into a platform and an application and they type that stuff and they sort of assume that somebody is holding on to all that stuff, which may be fine. But the other part, and it surprises me very much when people say, oh, I didn't know I had to store that email. So email is the other major form of communication, right? But emails have to be stored as well. So that's the other part. But now you have all this other digital media. So we get all these messages on WhatsApp and, SMS messages. Hey, can you please close down my offering? I said, wait a minute, send me an email or go into the platform and click the button so we can actually log and record that, right? And most people don't seem to, they somehow feel that if I call somebody and tell them something, that's good enough. But for compliance perspective, we have seen so many cases where the BD said, oh, I didn't know that. And yeah, we always push back and say, no, send us an email or go to the platform and click this button because you have that capability. So I think that's where the majority of the confusion is. And Oscar, I know you and I, we talked about this quite a lot where we say, we really have to educate everyone to stop having informal communications on social media, SMS, or hey, I called you, or I told this to you when we were having lunch at the restaurant. Okay, stop that and be much more formal with these communications, right? I mean, I think that's the key.
I do. Sorry, Marty, my apologies.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to add to that what records are required really depends on what activities you're doing. Rule 17a-4 actually goes into the specifics of what records need to be kept. The regulation CF has its own requirements for funding portals, which I'm just going to, I don't have this like off the top of my head, but I do have it like right here. It just says, so if you're a funding portal, and it also talks about the time period, you have to keep them for 5 years, and they have to be easily accessible for 2 years. But you have to keep all records related to an investor who purchases or attempts to purchase, all records related to issuers who offer, sell, or attempt to sell through the funding portal, records of all communications that occur on or through the platform, all records related to persons that use communication channels on the platform. You have to keep all records to demonstrate compliance with the requirements of the rules. So this would be, your application, this would be registration, this would be, your policies and procedures, inspection exams. You have to provide all notices that you provide to investors. So copies of all of that. So those are emails, any written agreements, any summaries, and then going to Kiran's point, if you're running ads, if you're doing social media, if you're doing, all of that has to be retained. And that can be an undertaking, right? I mean, most people aren't backing up their Instagram posts or their Twitter or X or Threads or whatever you're using posts. So they don't think about that, right?
Marty, let me.
Sorry, Kiran, go on.
No, sorry. I just had a quick follow-up question for Marty on this one. Marty, is it are people surprised by this, or does all of this come across as a bureaucratic, onerous task? Is it because people don't understand the types of legal issues and litigation that actually happens when the proper records are not produced. For example, shareholders can say, I did not actually get the notification, or no, I was not, that risks and document was not disclosed to me. Can you speak to some of that? Because I think people need to understand and not just simply treat this as, oh my God, there's more bureaucratic stuff that we have to do, but there's actually a good reason for it, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there is some of the bureaucratic things that have to be done.
Yeah.
I've gone through a FINRA exam, and with multiple clients, and it can be a little daunting to have to try to pull up this stuff, and some of it is you're scratching your head saying, why do you want to see this? But
Exactly.
that being said, having that information from just a common sense liability CYA standpoint makes sense. So again, if there's a shareholder action, or if there's something that happens, all of this is designed. There's two things that it's designed to protect. One, it's designed to protect the investor, right? And that's ultimately what FINRA and SEC, are supposed to be there for, is to protect the investors. So they want to be able to go back and see, okay, well, let's see what communication you had. Let's see your policies and procedures. We need to see logs of transactions. They want to be able to see all of that so they can make sure that you're compliant. But it also serves a dual purpose of, if you get caught in litigation, you get involved in a situation where the investor said, well, I didn't receive this notice. If you have records saying, yes, you did, here was the date that the notice, here was the notice, here's the date it was sent.
Yes.
All of that helps broker dealers, helps funding portals to, shield them from potential liability.
Yeah, and one of the sort of the interesting challenges that a technologist like myself and my team has is, how do we make all of that so efficient and smooth so people don't consider that to be a burden, like a bureaucratic manual burden? It kind of happens behind the scenes as much as possible, and I think that's the approach we take as well.
Yeah, I believe what's happened, the reason why we're having this discussion is because there's been a kind of conversion. So the conversion is that at one day we only had broker dealers on one side and we had funding platforms over here. And that discussion for Marty and a few others was pretty cool. It was, hey, let's just do this. But that discussion has now changed. Why? Because more and more broker dealers are getting involved in the background, and they're saying, yeah, you know what, here's my, I'll work with you guys, I'll do all the compliance, but they need to be as well aware of all the other elements. There's a word that I like, it's my favorite word. And it's my favorite word because it sounds difficult, it's tedious, of course, if you don't follow, but it's so simple if you work with people that know how to apply it. And that's attestations. Marty, both you and Kiran brought it up. What I can tell everybody right now, here's what FINRA is looking for. FINRA is coming in saying, knock, knock, knock. We would like for you to give us information on this particular investor. We want to see the email for this part, and we want to see an email from this part. So what does that mean? Of all the 25 different emails that went out, they only want to see these two. Do you know what I mean? And those, or that when they invested, they checked this mark off and stuff like that. And these are some of the things that everybody, both on the broker dealer side, because look, most of the transactions are happening online. I remember 3-4 years ago when we were talking about with broker dealers doing online, they go, well, yeah, we're not really sure, this and that. We know where FINRA is now looking at it. They're bringing them both together, saying, if it happens here, we need you to act the same way, and we need you to store it the same way. You can't skip any of the steps. So I think it all falls in line. I think it's not difficult when you're working with people who understand the mandated requirements to keep you in line with it, because right now I know most of the small players are not. They're looking at, I'm sure all of you saw, there were 12 different firms that paid $14 million for poor record keeping. So you were right, Marty. You were saying, is this a small brokerage firm, the nickel BD problem, or is this a 250? But obviously these are big broker dealers that got they too misunderstood the regulation when the regulators say record keeping digital records in this manner, and yes, what's up does constitute a program that we want you to keep track of it. So if they're getting it wrong in that level, and they can afford to pay the fine or find a way to pay the fine, for the smaller one, it's even more important that this is paid attention to, because we see this every day. Sometimes I get people contacting me via text message, WhatsApp, email, a phone call. And so if they're doing it with me, how many others are they doing it with, not realizing that all of these conversations as a FINRA broker dealer or a funding platform, you need to keep a record log, or you need to make sure that someone who you entrusted, like Global Relay in that case, who does all this, or working with us on the transactions. I guess, Marty, the question I have for you is, why is it that the smaller BD that we see out there, why do they think sometimes they don't need to fit the mold of the bigger one? And obviously FINRA is saying something different now. They're saying we're looking at all of you to apply it. This is my perception, and I just want to hear yours, because you deal with it. We both deal with the same audience at times, right?
Yeah. Again, the standard applies regardless of whether you're big or small. So I think that a lot of times a smaller shop, somebody that's just starting, there's a cost to it, right? And so they think, is this worth it? I'm small. Am I really gonna, is anyone really gonna care? Really gonna check? I know that, I work with a lot of firms on the front end, whether they're filing their Form BD or they're filing their Form, funding portal, FPNMA with FINRA, and in putting together the policies, your written policies and procedures, I've noticed an increased scrutiny on not only just the WSPs in general, but or written supervisory procedures in general, but also specifically on record keeping. And they really want to understand how that's done. And not only just like in your written policies and procedures, having it laid out, like these are our policies and procedures, but not just the what, but the how and the who. Like, how will this be enforced? Who's responsible for it? And how regularly are you going over this? So they're checking it on the front end with the broker dealers and funding portals, and then they're coming in. They're saying, okay, let's see your policy and procedures, and let's see your compliance with that. So I think that no one is immune. There was a question about the type of information that needs to be kept in with regards to emails and messages and so forth. I think the best practice is to have a system where you can retain all emails, but specifically emails with customers, clients. Those 100% have to be kept. And if you have some sort of messaging or communication channels within your marketplace or within your platform, you need to have a way to retain all of that information, so that it can, it needs to be not only retained, but it has to be easily accessible and searchable. So I know that a lot of, if you're building a platform, you need to make sure that feature is there.
That's fair.
No, I mean that applies to the chat support and chat messages and things like that, right? I mean, people have that. Yeah.
One of the things that we saw is I did have a client a few years ago that was a funding portal, and they became subject to a FINRA exam, and they did not have, they had policies and procedures, but they didn't follow them, and didn't keep records. And it was an interesting thing because they just, FINRA said, well, we need to see this, and they said, well, sorry, we don't have it, and you could tell FINRA was frustrated. They ultimately got fined and lost their license, so they had to pay kind of the ultimate cost for that. They were no longer able to operate. So the penalties aren't necessarily just fines. I mean, you could lose your business if you're not compliant.
And thank you for that. That brings up a really good point to understand. Just to recap a few good points that you brought up there, because I asked, we're seeing it from small to large, but you said rules apply to everybody. This is FINRA doesn't look at you as a small BD, or like you're a BD. You got a license. You got to operate this way. So that's number one. Number two, as a broker dealer, and you're working with a funding platform or a funding platform, you could lose your business. There it is. It's black and white. If you don't have a proper record keeping of all the information that needs to be done, and hopefully we're answering the questions that people are asking here of some of the providers that are used to, so you don't have to manually track your emails or your communications. That's the beauty of this industry. It does have a lot of different providers for different parts. For communications, is again, Global Relay is one. Then when it comes to funding platforms and issuances and storage compliance, and that's where we come in. The point is, the industry is taking care of you, but people need to understand why we're doing it for you, and more importantly, giving you the assurances that you can operate your business effectively without having to have that concern that you may be in a situation where you could lose your business. So I want to move into kind of the one question that it came up, and I didn't have the answer initially because Kiran brought it up. This rule is so old, so why are we talking about it now? And I mentioned that the amendments happened on October 22, but I just want to mention to everybody, it became effective January 3rd, 2023. So this is really an important aspect, is that it is now into effect. It's been in effect now for 10 months in the United States. So as a FINRA broker dealer, this is probably the reason why you're getting some of those spot audits, and they're asking you for attestations or copies of emails and stuff like that, because this is when it began this year. And if you're not talking to a partner or your lawyer, a 34 lawyer like Marty Tate's firm, to help you make sure your book of records are up to date, you need to have that discussion there. So I wanted to bring that up because I got pinged on the side to just say, when did this come up? Does that sound strange, Marty, that people are saying, I wasn't aware of this, and how come they didn't put out an email? It is odd, isn't it? Because this message did go out to everybody.
Yeah, it did. There was obviously an announcement, and like you said, I just think that people need to be aware, and I know that we put out a bulletin to our clients, and one of the things that just to be aware, one of the, I guess, positives about this is this is if you were complying with the WORM standard, you're still okay. Right? It didn't change anything to basically say you need to update for that perspective. What the rule does do is it makes it easier to comply with using cloud-based services, using electronic record storage as we think of it now versus traditional. So I think a lot of firms were aware of it, and they saw it and said, well, we're already using this WORM standard, and to move over to something else might be more expensive. Some people saw it and said, this is great, this is what we're already doing. We already were using cloud-based services. The thing to think about with that is that not only did it say, okay, you can use this, but it did impose this audit trail requirement, which again says you have to be able to go in and you have to be able to create an audit trail of the document, when it was created, who's had access to it, if there have been any changes, what those changes are. That's the standard now, so that, in looking at a system for record keeping, they have to have that audit trail capability. So that, which I think a lot of them do. So
Absolutely.
anyway.
And the other thing, Marty, is that every single piece of this audit and to go back and review the records it's a huge time commitment. People have to pull out all these records and match all the transactions, look at all the supporting documentation, the data, and then package the report and send it out. That is a tremendous amount of work. And if they didn't actually have the data to begin with properly stored in a central location, now they have to go and cobble that together from multiple systems. So that's another huge headache. So I don't know if most people are aware how burdensome that can be. And I know you might have seen this from your side, and I know we have seen this trying to support people from our side as well.
Yeah, it can be very burdensome. Absolutely.
Well, here's the sorry, Kiran, I'm going to ask the two of you something, because obviously I don't want to be everybody doom and gloom. It isn't. We're brought up the rules. So what does it mean? I'm looking at it the positive, and I think Barney, you brought it up. FINRA, the SEC are there to protect the investor, the industry, the intermediaries, provide rules so everybody plays safe and everybody make money. Let's just make sure we're very clear. We want everybody to make money. We want you to do it compliantly. So there's some really interesting benefits to all of this, and I want to talk about that, because I think sometimes people go, "Oh, this thing is such a drain," but let's talk about some of the benefits. So, I mean, Kiran, it's easy for you from a technology point of view, and then we can talk about the cost side of it, because I think those are the real big winners. When somebody comes knocking on your door, you need to put 30 different people to look for something versus using technology. Yours.
Click the button, get me that report, and it automatically collates all of that, all of the supporting docs, and gives you a nice, beautiful report and says, "Here you go, run with it," right? And that is the nirvana, right? Are we close to getting there? Yeah, we're doing everything we can to get as close to that as possible, right? I mean, will we ever get close to it? It depends, because sometimes the auditors will ask for a very specific piece of information in a very specific format, right? And then we'll have to pony up for that one. And on the note of, I know there's been some excellent questions about global relay and those. It seems to me that we all need to be thinking about redundancy, right? It's not as if we depend on one provider and say, "Yeah, we're sending them everything, we're done," right? It's multiple. We store stuff, yep, and BDs will do definitely on their side. Marketplaces will do the same on their side, and the more we build some redundancy into this, it gives us a much more robust architecture and a way to fulfill those requirements. Right? I mean, wouldn't you agree, Oscar? We have seen this happen so many times, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, I'm looking at it from an operational point of view. Before, I would have to have all these different bodies managing it manually in drawers and all that. I know Marty may not be happy with this, because, but we still look, Marty. Look, does it make it easier if you're my lawyer as a broker dealer? You're my 34 lawyer for my firm, funding platform. I come prepared. I get a request. I still need you to respond to it because it has to be professionally written, but it's well organized, date stamping, and here it is. I mean, that just demonstrates to the regulators you're taking them seriously. Am I wrong in that, or?
No, that's absolutely right, and that is the process, and there's nothing worse than, so for example, when you said that correctly, when we get that type of letter or preparing our response, it's great as the attorneys to be able to say, "Yes, we're compliant, and here's our record. See Exhibit A or whatever. Or look at the data room or whatever it might be." What's bad is when how I typically do it is I'll get one of those and I will go through and I will formulate responses, and then I'll go to the company and say, okay, I need to see this, I need to see this, I need to see this. What's terrible is when they say we don't have that, because then you have to come back and you have to either be creative with your answer to FINRA, or just fall on the sword and say, we don't we don't have any records of those, or we haven't created this audit trail, or we only kept those records for 3 years and not 5, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that everybody needs to see it, and we need to be aware that every once in a while, either the SEC and FINRA are going to be knocking on the door. Maybe they'll go, they'll be relaxed for the next year, but when they do come back, they're going to be looking for a record from 3-4 years back. And the last thing you want, if you're a small firm, it will slow down your business because you get wrapped up in this. You got nothing else to do because they give you a short period to reply. So I see it as a win-win as well. When you have a dispute with a potential investor, oh, I did not make this investment, it wasn't me, and I didn't get, that's the beauty of electronic transactions, right? Everything, the evidence is there. You're collecting the IP address, you're collecting the attestation, you collected the tick. Like it's kind of hard to dispute all that, right, Kiran? I mean, from a technology point of view, it once you present it to them, oh shoot, I forgot that was me.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's undeniable anymore, right? I mean, that's the thing. There were some really good questions about when we look for these third-party providers. What are some best practices? What should we be asking them, right? I mean, there are some standard things that we always have to ask. And I've been in the business on the other side of the fence when we had to interview a lot of vendors and find out what they do. So first of all, it's always important to figure out that the vendor can stay in business, right? I mean, how are they funded? Is it a good, is it a viable business so that they just don't go out of business, and then they lose all your records, right? So it's important to make sure, are they aware of all the applicable regulations? If you say, hey, we want to store based on rule 17-4A, A-4, they'll say, what's that? I mean, that's a red flag. You don't want that. Okay. The other important thing, and I'll mention this because the industry is rife with so many subcontracting third-party providers. You never know where they actually store and who is actually storing it. Many of these people might be resellers, right? They contract with you, but then they have this other independent arrangement with somebody else. And so you always ask, so where is the end location of this one? Is it inside the United States, or is it going to be in the Philippines or some other place like that? So you have to be very, very careful about things like that. The other questions that I would ask from a technology perspective are, what is the specific technology you're using, the worm technologies, and how secure are they? What protocols are they actually following up? What are the backup policies that they have for all that information? How do they back it up? And here is the other kicker too. What are the security policies they follow, especially when it comes to employees accessing this information? Do they have ID check and verification, background check and KYC done on their own internal employees? And do they have security policies that prevent them from taking copies somewhere else, right? And walking out with a laptop and so on. So I think those are some of the important standard things, we need to ask.
Yeah, I think we're starting to ask them, and there's some really. You're going to hear one of the speakers in the next few additional webinars we got coming up next Wednesday. We got every week until November the 22nd. You'll see Marty again, of course, because he is the expert. But we're also bringing in the CEO of a company called Compliance Risk. And what is Compliance Risk do? They work with companies like us. They work with Marty Tate. What are we doing? They're the implementers. Marty's giving the manual. Okay, that's great. Now somebody's got to read it. Someone's got to implement it. And so Compliance Risk is one of those companies. They're regulators, some of them themselves. It's up their CEO, Mitch. You can find them on LinkedIn. So the important thing here is that there is an ecosystem here to support you. You need to look at the benefits, not as the negative. And that's the way compliance needs to come in. I'll never forget this. For me, this is really interesting. It brings flashbacks of 2002. And for people listening here, you might have remember the headlines, where were the directors? and that was when Enron collapsed. Bre-X, stock went from $300 a share to less than 2 pennies a share. So what did it all mean? It meant the regulators wanted to bring in enforceability or accountability, I should say, to the market to instill confidence in the marketplace. And what did it do? It brought in corporate governance. It brought in Sarbanes-Oxley. All these different rules came in again, and there were those who implemented it graciously and saw the benefits of it because they were able to attract more capital from it. They were able to attract better customers. And there were those that, oh my God, this thing's such a burden. I hate doing this. This just only gets in the way. And very quickly, those whittle away, right? So I think this is for those who have a long journey and to make, flourish your careers and grow your firms. I think this is the one thing that I would suggest is that you look at this never from a cost of compliance, but the value of what it's going to do for you as a company, as a firm, I should say, in implementing this and working with the right player. Yes, there's going to be an initial hit, but what company doesn't go through an initial hit? Look at us. We're a technology company. You have to spend millions of dollars before you can see the return. See, so it's no different. Lawyers. Well, no, you only need Marty, and you start making it right away. But I mean, that's different. But Marty had to go to university for 12 years before that happened. But my point is just you have to invest in your future in order to get the return and to see it. And then when everybody else is being crumpled, Marty, listen to you. You're going to appreciate this. You may remember way back in 2012. Remember all the different providers that were going to go live? Remember all of them? Where are they now? Only a handful stayed. And the ones that stayed are the ones that had a long-term plan vision. They knew they were going to do it the right way. And then we got another wave that came in. And sure enough, that wave is cleaning them off. This year, we'll probably lose 30-40% of the ones that just came in to make the fast buck. And they'll use excuses. Oh, it's getting so regulated. It's too regulated. It is not too regulated, right? We hear this all the time. It's not too regulated. It's actually so easy to follow. But first, you need to read it, not dismiss it, and you need to get the right guidance and advice. And and once this information is there, it allows you to freely operate knowingly that you can have your firm in a safe environment. So I think that's my biggest takeaway from Rule 17A. I don't see it as a negative. I see it as what an amazing opportunity for everybody to implement this and what the value they're going to get tenfold because they're applying it. They're not going to be slowed down by this. Marty, did you have any comments on that?
No, I agree. Maybe it's because I'm a lawyer, but I agree. That all of these things are, compliance. All of these things are put in place for a reason. I think that you definitely do see, a little bit of a weeding out because of some of these things. They can become burdensome. I will admit that, but I think that as we talked about before, there is a reason behind the madness, and there are solutions that are affordable. I go back to the day that everything had to be kept in paper formats, and you would have boxes, and guys with dollies would come and pick up the boxes and take them away to a secure facility. And I think it's a lot cheaper and easier than it was then. So I kind of embrace all these changes.
Agreed. And part of this it's funny. I look back when we got started, what we first saw, and we never fear additional or any regulations because in many ways we were always ready for that path. And part of that, it's the reason why Kiran and I ended up connecting and jolted our ideas together really quickly and bringing a solution that we went right through the front door of the SEC. And this is the benefit to all broker-dealers and funding platforms is that not only are the stores, but Kiran, why don't you share a little bit of that information with us?
Oh, certainly. So when we went down this whole path, we said compliance is so important. We got to secure everything. We have to perfect all of the data and transactions that happen on our system. It's all a permission chain, right? So we had this concept that we can't do public. Public is not the route to go for various reasons. And, Marty, you're the expert on securities regulations, so I won't speak to that one. But the whole point of that is how can we, so we anticipated this whole question of the worm way back, and we said the blockchain, a permission blockchain, is the perfect worm, right? It's so decentralized, distributed, and all of this is so cryptographically sealed. And this is the new technology. So, and again, redundancy, I'm a big believer in redundancy, right? You just can't trust only one thing. So we said, fine, the regulators want worm. We have that already, and that's what we're giving. But in addition to that, we also have the whole concept of a core chain, a permission chain on which you can store all this, all cryptographically totally sealed. And guess what? Some of those are actually regulator core nodes, right? And we have the APIs for any regulator who wants to step forward and say, you know what, that's cute, that's beautiful. I don't have to request from you guys. I just hit the button, in our system, and it connects to the chain, and I get all the records that I need to, right? Yes, and that kind of facility is possible as well. So we have this multiple checks and balances in our redundant architecture for compliance. Basically, we have our systems, BDs have their systems, marketplace have theirs, funding platforms, and so on. And there is a worm storage, and there's a chain, it's recorded on it, and there are regulator nodes, all of them independently operated. I mean, it. So we keep pushing the envelope on this one. And as Oscar said, none of this should be viewed in a, oh my God, it's a burden. No, it's to protect everybody. It's to give credibility to what we do in this particular space, right? So for me, I mean, stuff like that on technology, it's very, very exciting. So I said, wow, I mean, that's a great vision. Let's do it, right? And we have done it, of course. It's been in production since October of 2019.
Thank you, Kiran. And I think this is it just reinforces that we're all, the industry as a whole, we're all trying to find solutions that help you operate efficiently, effectively. But I think the big takeaway for today, because we're coming down to the half hour here to be completed, is that the rule is here. It came into effect in January 2023. That means if you haven't done it yet, reach out to Marty. That's your first call you got to make. We're the techs. We're going to provide you the tech that's going to comply with it, but you need to understand the rule. Reach out to compliance risk. Reach out to the experts who will help you understand what you need to implement and how it affects your firm overall. And then once you have that roadmap, then okay, this is how I'm going to bring it in. These are the things. Because maybe you're not running a funding platform. Maybe you only have a broker dealer firm that just does traditional Reg Ds or whatever it is. But it doesn't matter what it is you do, however you operate, you need to implement this quickly, because the last thing you need at this time is that knock letter. And as Marty already alluded to, in some cases, you're not going to be able to tell them, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know this was. No, you don't get a pass. The rules are in effect, which means you need to apply them, and you need to make sure that you do it effectively, and make FINRA aware who those parties are that you're working with. So if at any time data is required, FINRA knows where to go to reach out and get that information. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. Kiran, your last words?
Compliance, safety, and it's not just a technology, it's also a process, being educated, understanding what is required, and of course, technology is there to facilitate all of that.
Thank you. Marty?
Yeah, I'll just reaffirm what you both have said. One thing that to note is, again, this applies to broker dealers. We didn't go into sort of the application of this to funding portals, but the same basic rules apply, and so you're not exempt. So yeah, if you need help, let us know.
Actually, it's a really good closing. To me, I don't differentiate the difference anymore. I just treat them. You're registered with FINRA. You're in there. You got to
It is,
follow the
yes.
rules. And if you're unclear of that, don't make guesses. Don't go to a 34 lawyer. This is an important part. This is, if the one piece of education is important, in the United States, there are two different types, a 33 lawyer and a 34. A 34 is the one that can guide you and answer these questions like Marty Tate here. Look, we want to keep everyone safe. And the only way we're going to do that quickly is for people to get the right guidance and advice and make sure that they're implementing things correctly. We as a technology provider, we are going to reinforce that. We're going to, look, if people don't want to follow it, we're going to say thank you very much, but maybe somewhere else you need to be. But on that note, I want to thank everybody for coming down. I know there was a lot of people that registered and couldn't make it. And the good thing is, like always, we record our sessions. We'll make them available to you. We're very easy to reach. Obviously, you can go to KoreSummit.com. You can go to speakers. You'll find Marty's connection, his LinkedIn profile, Dr. Garimella's, his LinkedIn profile, as well his email address for both of them. So you can reach out and ask any questions you may like. I want to thank everybody today for coming down and coming back to the Core Summit. And we're looking forward to continuing this educational journey for all of you. Have a fantastic week, and we will see all of you next week on Wednesday as we discuss the KYC process for how do you operate using Regulation CF as a broker-dealer and a funding platform. And obviously with this discussion, boy, it's going to be a good one. Till then, have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.